Today we speak about, we're not anymore, we finished Shavuos, we were over, we get back to Parshas HaShavua. This week's parsha is an interesting parsha, Shlach. Shlach, the word Shlach, what is the word Shlach? Reminds us of a different word. Shaliach, Shluchai Shel Adam Kamaisa. The messenger of a person is like the one who sends him, Mishaleach, the sender. Shluchai Shel Adam.
That's an interesting thought.
Kamaisa.
A whole shir on
One
that.
that sends a person is like the person.
The Shaliach, he represents the Mishaleach, and when the Mishaleach sends the Shaliach, if it's not for an Aveira, then the Shaliach is like his Mishaleach.
We just had a whole shir on that, on
Yeah.
maybe get.
And there's another point here, although, which is interesting. And here I want to go to the Sam Sofer. It says something interesting about a pasuk here. It takes the pasuk, and this opens up a light to this whole shlichus. If these shluchim, Moshe HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Moshe Rabbeinu, Shlach l'cha anoshim. Vayishlach oiso Moshe mi-midbar paran. Moshe sent them from Midbar Paran, al pi Hashem. All right. By the words of Hashem, as Moshe didn't do it by himself, it's al pi Hashem. Kulam anoshim. Kulam anoshim, Rashi says, al pi Hashem, Rashi first of all, al pi Hashem, but Hashem didn't tell him you have to do it. But Vayikav Yoda, Hashem let it be. It could have been good. Kulam anoshim, kol anoshim shel mikra loshen chashivas. The word anoshim means, there are different words for humanity. The word anoshim means they're important people. They were tzaddikim. Oisoi shah, at that point, ksherim hoyu. They were tzaddikim. They didn't do any chat. Roshei b'nei Yisrael heima. Heads of Am Yisrael. The kitzur. So the Chassam Sofer says like this. They could have been saved and nothing would have come out. But maybe we'll have to be introduced. Was it a good thing? Chat. Let's talk about it, practically speaking. Was this a right thing to send these spies? Or was it something incorrect? Incorrect, I say incorrect. Was it non-correct, the kitzur, in short? So the answer...
Was it correct?
Was it correct or not? The answer is...
Because, the answer is.
I don't know.
Okay, because, and I talk about something modern today. When a leader, separates himself from the people, and the people become an object to be manipulated, which is the way it turned out, that leader should no longer be a leader. So the leaders that they sent had separated themselves from the people and were going to use the people as their tool rather than truly representing the people. And we have something like that in the realm of politics today, where once a leader becomes a leader, he thinks he appointed himself, and he doesn't
we'll
know
talk about that. It's a little bit, not so black and white, but there is something of the element there. 1 minute.
Okay.
You're right, in a
that's
certain
well,
point.
That's good.
But the first of the point is, what is the point of spies at all? So like this, the Am had one kavanah, had one intention, and Moshe had a different intention. The justification for spies is, if you're going to make a war, even though everything was going to be according to miracle, but there is a concept of dressing up the miracle in the ways of nature. At first, Hashem doesn't want to run the world with miracles. Of course, we say that nature itself is the biggest miracle. It's a constant miracle. But that's the constant miracle that Hashem wants to run the world. If there's no choice, He makes miracles. But at first, how much it's possible to approach nature, this is the wish of Hashem. So it was a practical step of what we call in Hebrew hishtadlut, effort, natural effort. You're going to make a battle. Know which way is it, which way it's less of a miracle to succeed. Enter from the south, enter from the north. Where is the best place to begin your battle? So that has a practical application. But if you're in doubt whether you can, there's another way to send spies. Are these people strong enough that I have a practical chance to succeed? Am I strong enough? Are they weak that I can practically succeed? Or these people are so strong that I can't succeed? Let me check if it pays to make a war with these people. Send spies. Can we succeed or can we not succeed? That, in this case over here, was a disqualified apostle thought, because that would be doubting the faith of Hashem. Hashem said, I'm giving you the gift of Eretz Yisrael. I promise you the whole reason I took you out of Egypt is to give Eretz Yisrael. So no matter how it looks, even if it looks like an impossible task, if Hashem promised it, to doubt that the fulfillment of that promise is a lack of faith in Hashem. So if you're sending the shluchim to check the method, how you're sure you're going to succeed, but you want to know how to succeed, that's perfectly all right. But if you're sending these messengers to check whether we should at all approach this issue, maybe it pays to stay in the desert because we're sure to lose. Do we have a chance of winning? This is possible. Moshe Rabbeinu sent them with the intention of checking what will be the proper way to succeed. Which way to succeed? The Am had a fear, and they sent them to check, can we at all succeed? There was a doubt of emunah. If these shluchim would have went with the thoughts of Moshe and representing Moshe, they went according to the das of Moshe, then they would have had siyata d'shmaya. But they went, it seems, with the thoughts of the nation. Here I go back to the point of shluchai, how we can apply this practically to our life. Shluchai shel adam k'moisam. The shliach is like the mishaleach. The mishaleach has a power of influence on his shliach. If, because the machshava, they thought kulam ksherim, this is one of the approaches, there are many different approaches. I'm taking one approach now, right in a second we'll speak another approach. Because kulam anoshim b'ksherim, they were all kosher. But because they went here, perhaps a little bit of what you said, democracy. They were thinking they want to supply the wish of the nation. They were representing the nation and not Moshe Rabbeinu, the leader of the nation. So they were affected by the thought of the nation in their shlichus, whether to check if they can all succeed. And this, they came back and influenced the nation in the wrong way if they can't succeed. This was a chet gadol that they put fear into the people. That's one way. So if they would have had intention to follow the thought of Moshe, then they would have done it in the right way. Another point. Then I get back to the Chassam Sofer. Kulam anoshim, they were tzaddikim. If they would have went al pi Hashem, let's forget about Moshe, let's forget about the Am. If they would have had the intention to be the shluchim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if this would have been their intention, to fulfill the mitzvah, now it became a mitzvah. Hashem didn't say, but once Moshe Rabbeinu sent up Hashem, Hashem didn't prevent, it becomes a mitzvah. So if they would have had intention, I am now a shliach of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and Moshe is the representative of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, al pi Hashem. If they they would have put their whole heart and thought to fulfill the shlichus with loyalty, to be totally loyal to their shlichus, given over to their shlichus. We have a principle in Sefer Kohelet, shomer mitzvah lo yeda dovara. If a person is doing a mitzvah, the mitzvah itself will protect him from coming to a chet. But when his intention is to fulfill the will of Hashem, we are all shluchim. This is the message to us in our life. We are sent down, the neshama is sent down to this world on a shlichus. We come to this world on a shlichus. If we think of ourselves in such terms, we are the shluchim rachmanim. We are the shlichim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And a person says, I'm going to give my life for this shlichus, I want to be a loyal messenger to Hashem, he'll be protected to go in the right way. But what did these shlichim do? Roshei b'nei Yisrael heimu. If they would have, let's take this pasuk and split it in here. Vayishlach Oisa Moshe. Vayishlach Oisa Moshe mimid b'paron al pi Hashem. If they would have been al pi Hashem, kulam anoshim, then they would have been all tzaddikim. They would have stayed tzaddikim. But they let their personal biases influence them. Roshei b'nei Yisrael heima. They were the leaders of Am Yisrael, so they went with Gaiva. We are the leaders. And they wanted to stay the leaders. Like Rashi brings down, of course it was, here we need a Freudian concept, of course it was, so maybe you shouldn't mention his name, Rasha, but Shem was showing your kavanah, but the principle of subconscious existed before Florida. Maybe they weren't aware themselves, but they had a hidden agenda which their conscious hid from them, which was they thought that maybe they'll have less honor when they enter Eretz Yisrael. So this negia, this bias of kavod and honor influenced them not to be totally loyal to their shlichus, not to be totally doing it for the Ratzon Hashem. But they could have conquered that bias. If they sort of said, now we have a shlichus and we're the messengers of Hashem, and they would have went l'shem Hashem, the mitzvah itself and the kavanah of going l'shem Hashem would have protected them. What's the message to us? There's the koyach hamish. Let's take the first part. The mishaleach, the sender, puts his koyach into the shliach. If a person sees himself as a shliach of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he gets different powers. Koyach hamishaleach b'shliach. He's a messenger of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If he gives his life, he's moisa nefesh hashlichus. He says, I'm a shliach of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And he sees himself in life as a shliach. This itself gives himself power. Secondly, if he's doing it for the sake of the shlichus, then he's a shliach mitzvah. And shluchei mitzvah eino mizoichim. Shluchei mitzvah are not harmed. It doesn't only mean physical harm. Shluchei mitzvah will not be harmed, not physically and not spiritually. Shomer mitzvah lo yeda dovara. If a person is doing it for the sake of the mitzvah, that's his whole intention. He gives his whole mitzvah. I want to fulfill the mitzvah itself protects him. And here I want to go off an issue. Today is the Yurtzeit, the day that was Nifter Rab Chaim Volozhiner, father of all the yeshivas. So let's say something that he writes in Nefesh HaChaim. He speaks about Gan Eden and Gehenna. And he explains that Gan Eden is not a place that Hashem created, that the tzaddikim, it's prepared from before, and the tzaddikim walk into it. They have the skus, they have the entry ticket to go into this place called Gan Eden. And Gehenna is not this place prepared for Rishayim, and the Rishayim are pushed into this place Gehenna. You know who creates the Gan Eden and Gehenna are constantly being created. The person, when a person says Asher Kiddushanu b'mitzvayso l'tzivonu, when he makes a blessing and he prepares himself to do a mitzvah. By the way, if he makes this blessing with more intention, he creates that he is now a shliach mitzvah. He creates that he's a message of the mitzvah. The very thought that he sees himself now as being a messenger of Hashem, at that moment surrounds him an enormous light of kedusha, and he is sitting at that moment in his life in Gan Eden. But because he has a physical body, so he doesn't feel that he's in Gan Eden. But the minute that a person thinks that he's doing a mitzvah, the malachim, the kedusha of Gan Eden surrounds him. He is in Gan Eden. In this world, he's already in Gan Eden, and he's creating that Gan Eden with his thoughts of kedusha. He's close to Hashem, and that Gan Eden that he's in helps him and is messiah him to complete the mitzvah. That's bol etayah messiah. So if a person comes to purify himself, he gets siyata b'shmaya, he gets help from Hashem. The kedusha that surrounds the person when he has those thoughts to do the mitzvah, that kedusha itself helps him complete the mitzvah. And that's the bracha shekidshonu b'mitzvah. So what does the word kidshonu mean? The word kedusha means to be dedicated. Right? What a hektish. You have the concept of hektish. What is hektish? Sanctified. What is sanctified? It's dedicated to Hashem. Asher kidshonu b'mitzvah. He sanctified us to his mitzvahs. It means he was miyachad us. He made us unique to serve him in his commandments. He dedicated us to his commandments. And I'm now dedicating myself, my whole being, to fulfill the Ratzon Hashem. That's the meaning of the bracha shekidshonu mitzvah. He says, I'm now appointing myself as a shliach of the Meshalech HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's minui hashlichus. If you learned about shlichus, the Meshalech is memana the shliach. When a person says Asher kidshonu b'mitzvayso b'tzivonu, he's saying that I'm now accepting the minui hashlichus, the appointment of messageship from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I'm now a shliach mitzvah. And that point is surrounded by a light of Kedusha and Gan Eden, and that helps him fulfill the mitzvah. And when a person does an Aveira Rachmanu Litzlan the other way, it's as if right now, with that Yetzer Hara, he's lighting the fire of Gehenna. He's not going to go to Gehenna 120 years later. He's right now in Gehenna. He's the tumor of the Chet. That itself is the Gehenna. Just now, HaKadosh Baruch Hu prevents that tumor from burning his neshama. But he's already lit the light that wants to burn his neshama. It's Gehenna and Gan Eden are not something that you get after 120. The Gehenna and Gan Eden is something that you're creating with your choices right now in the here and present. This is the Veritas to say over B'Shem Reb Chaim Volozhin that it's his Yurtzat Rebili Nishmasai. We should have the schus that he should be mechaven us in the right way. And Sefer Nefesh HaChaim. And this is Nogeh to the Parsha because this is the whole Yesod, the whole foundation of the Parsha, that Shlach, that we are Shluchim Mitzvah. If these Shluchim would have had the proper intention, and they would have, even though the Am Yisrael had different, they would have had Kavana, the intention to be the Shluchi HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then the mitzvah itself would have saved him. The problem is when a person mixes in the mitzvahs his own personal bias. That's what the pasuk continues and says, Roshei B'nai Yisrael Heimer. They didn't do it with humility as the Shluchim of Hashem. They thought, we are the heads of Am Yisrael. We have a responsibility to the nation. We have to be faithful to the people, what the people want. If that faith to the people, that violated the trust of Kodesh Baruch Hu and took away the siyata d'shmaya, and that's what brought them to chet. And that's how the pasuk is divided up. Al pi Hashem. If they would have done it al pi Hashem, then anoshim heimer. They would have been tzaddikim b'ksheirem. The problem is Roshei B'nai Yisrael heimer. They did it at the heads of Am Yisrael. They did it with, maybe that's a place of source for what you said. Democracy. They did it as the heads of the people. They should have done it. They should have seen themselves as the shluchim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then the mitzvah would have protected them. We find that Moshe Rabbeinu prays for Yeshua. The Targum, so two nice things are connected with this. The Targum, Yonasan Ben Azil, says, when Moshe Rabbeinu saw the humility of Yeshua, so he davened for him to save him from Atzas Meraglim. What in the world does the chet of the Meraglim have to do with the humility of Yeshua? Because of his humility, he'll come to sin and bring it back the wrong shlichus. So the Chassam Sofer says something interesting. Chassam Sofer says one of the parts of their shlichus was check if they have any schus. You'll see that they have no schus. V'schazaktem re'isim ha'esh bo etz im ayin. Do they have a tree to rely on? That means, do they have sheirim of tzaddikim that they can rely on that might save them? So Yehoshua, so he said things like this. Chavis Alavava says they asked the tzaddik how he reached godless. So he said because he reached greatness because everybody he saw as being greater than himself. Why? When he honored every person, he saw every person as being more than himself. How? When he was dealing with somebody younger than him, he didn't have time yet to do Averis. I'm living longer, I have more Averis than him. He did less Averis than me. When he approached somebody older than him, so he said, he's living longer than me. He must have done more mitzvahs than me. He had more time to learn Torah, more time to do mitzvahs. He has more mitzvahs than me. And so every time he had a cheshbon to make the other one greater than himself. Now Yeshua, he was afraid. Yeshua had such humility, so Yeshua is going to come. They had to check if there's any tzaddikim amongst them, because Yeshua is such an anav, so he's going to say, the tzaddikim, the people of Canaan, he's going to see that these goyim are tzaddikim, so Am Yisrael is going to be afraid. So he said, Hashem should save him from a person that for the Kvod Shemayim, he has to, sometimes it's not good to be an anav. Two, and I know in the wrong place, like the Gemara says, the Anivis of Zechariah ben Avkilis was Machnik the Beis HaMikdash. See, the name of Hashem, Yud Kei Vav, we spoke about this a few times. The Vav Hey, that's the Hashkocha of HaKadosh Baruch Hu down here. That's the divine craft down here. That's the Hashem goes down to the earth. The Yud Kei is the Roimus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Said, Ko Yoshiacha v'yatzas meraglim. But Yeshua should have a little bit of roimus, a little bit. Here he shouldn't be such a humility. He should see the Ra and not come back and report that they're tzaddikim. That's a pshat of the Chassam Sofer. He should l'shem shemayim. Here he shouldn't try to see only the good. Here was a mitzvah to see the Ra of the Rishoyim. To be always seeing the schus is a good thing. When it comes to Rishoyim, then it's not such a good. You're not supposed to, in real Rishoyim, what isn't supposed to be melamed schus on them. That's what we learn from the Chassam Sofer. Those people that suddenly becomes big Rishoyim and they want to say schus and has to check why are they suddenly finding schus on Rishoyim. Big Rishoyim, it's not a mitzvah to find schus on them. But there's a second pshat. At this point, there was a nevuah at the time of the Asifas Kainim in last week's parsha. If you remember, Eldad and Medad said a prophecy, and Yeshua was very upset from this prophecy. What was the prophecy? They said a prophecy. Moshe Mace. Moshe is going to die. And Yeshua is going to bring Am Yisrael into Eretz Yisrael. So when I saw him with Seifers, he says, the Meraglim, they didn't want to go to Eretz Yisrael. Why? They thought they'll have less honor. Yeshua had a bias in exactly the opposite direction. Yeshua loved his Rebbe so much. He says, if we're going to come to Eretz Yisrael, Moshe didn't say that their prophecy is false. So if we're going to go now to Eretz Yisrael, that means that Moshe Rabbeinu is going to die. They'll lose Manhattan. So Yeshua wants to keep them in the middle. Moshe Rabbeinu should stay alive the whole time. So he was Yeshua had an opposite negia. The Meraglim, they wanted to go and didn't want to go to Eretz Yisrael because of their own covenant. Yeshua didn't want to go into Eretz Yisrael because of the covenant of his Rebbe. He loves his Rebbe so much, so he was afraid that maybe his love, his loyalty to Moshe Rabbeinu would make him maybe make the wrong shlichus. So Moshe Rabbeinu, Kashi, he saw the anivus, he saw the humility of Yeshua, that Yeshua is happy to stay there, even though Yeshua heard that he'll be the melech, the hepech, he'll be the king. No, Yeshua doesn't want to be the king. He's very happy in the present situation. He wants to be the Talmud of Moshe Rabbeinu. He doesn't want to be the king of Am Yisrael. He wants to learn from Moshe Rabbeinu. So when he saw the Anov of Yeshua, he's afraid that exactly the opposite. The Anov of Moshe Rabbeinu will make him stay. So we do the Chayte that Am Yisrael should stay in the middle to keep his Rebbe alive. And so the Chassam Sofer says Pshat in the Pasuk. He says that the Talmud, when he has a Rebbe, the Rebbe sometimes keeps the Talmud paralyzed. It could be because the Rebbe has the whole picture, and the Talmud is not bepoil, he's not actualized. And that's Pshat in the Pasuk. Or Zorua Latzadik. The Tzaddik has a light that's planted within him. Zorua, it's inside. Something Zorua planted inside doesn't come out, it's not actualized. The Talmud, as long as his Rebbe is alive, there's an Or Zorua, but it's not bepoil. But the tzaddikim, the talmidim amitiyim, the yishrei leiv, those that are righteous in their heart, they're happy to stay that way. They're not looking that it should come out to bring out their potential, that they want to be big. They want to learn from the Rebbe. Oh, Zorua latatz Yoshua. Oh, Zorua latzadik. The tzaddik, it's an Or Zorua. He has a potential that's not covered, it's not actualized. But the yishrei leiv, those that are righteous in their heart, simcha, they're happy to say that way. And that was the state of Yeshua. So Moshe Rabbeinu had to pray specially that Yeshua shouldn't, from his loyalty to his Rebbe, paradoxically the opposite way around, come to a chet. That maybe the loyalty to his Rebbe would bring him to chet. Now, interesting, no? Exactly the opposite. But he had Negias, poof! This world is a typo. By the Meraglim, their own honor, and by him, the honor of his Rebbe. Maybe the Dafka the Midas Toivus of Yeshua, the good characteristic traits, might bring him to a chet.
It sounds like Caleb should have been the new leader, because Yahushua was always want to be in the shadows, while the other ones were more interested in their honor. And Caleb, they could get up there, and by a turn of the phrase.
One second. We'll talk about next subject. All right, next subject.
Oh, okay.
Let's talk about that too. Very good. You give me the subjects. Next subject. Vayas Kolev Esa'om El Moshe. So there's a question. Why specifically was it Kolev that quieted the people? Where was Yeshua? The Meraglim Amoitzi Diva, they come back and they put fear into the people. And they say, Eretz Echelas Yeshvel, we can't make it. I mean, they say afterwards. But before they bring back that they're so powerful, we have to be afraid of them. Vayas Kolev Esa'om El Moshe. Kolev quiets the nation. V'yoyma Oloi Na'le V'yarashnu Esok. Yochel Nuchala, we'll succeed. What was the psychological element that the spies used? Not only psychological, they was their thinking. They said, they used also this nevuah. Let's go back to this nevuah. Moshe is going to die, and Yeshua is going to bring us to the Eretz. So they said, why? We can have a question. Why does the Am Yisrael suddenly have such fear? They saw all these unbelievable miracles. So why now suddenly are they going to be afraid? He said, no. All the miracles was because Moshe is this superhuman being, and he made these miracles. But Moshe Rabbeinu is going to leave us. He's not going to live 120. The Nevi'im said he's going to die. And then we're going to fall. We won't have this powerful Moshe Rabbeinu, this big tzaddik who brought down the Torah from Shemayim. And then we won't succeed. And the other ones will succeed. So Yaakov came and said, you're making a big mistake. Look! All the 40, and so it was. He said, the whole schus, the power of the tzaddikim, the leaders, of Am Yisrael is only because of the kedusha of Am Yisrael itself. Like it says in the Torah in Parshas Ki Sisa, Moshe HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Moshe Rabbeinu, Leich reid kishichas amcha. So Rashi says, what's leich reid? Reid migulascha. Go down from your greatness. Kishichas amcha. Klum natati lecha gdula el l'shvu b'nei Yisrael. All your greatness is because you are the shliach. Let's go back to the shliach ne'meshaleach. The Gadol in Am Yisrael, he's only a shliach of the tzibur. He's a messenger of the tzibur. Who's the Mashalech Klal Yisrael? The godless of the shliach of the Gadol is because of the kedusha of Am Yisrael. So he said, Moshe Rabbeinu didn't do those miracles in his own power as an individual. He did it because he represented the kedusha of Am Yisrael. And therefore, even if we won't have Moshe, those same miracles will take place. Don't be afraid if Moshe dies. This is what Kalif told Am Yisrael. Yeshua couldn't say that, Yeshua will say, you know why he wants to enter Eretz Yisrael? He wants to be the big man. He wants to be the king. Because he Moshe makes Yeshua Machnisam La'aretz. So he wants to be, that's what he's saying. So Yeshua couldn't open up his mouth. Immediately the nation is going to say, Yeshua is biased. He wants, which is exactly the opposite, but that's what happens in Lashon Hara. When it says about the Gadol, exactly the opposite. Here we just now spoke that Yeshua is so loyal to Moshe, he might have an idea, the opposite, that to say that one shouldn't enter, he says keep Moshe alive. But this minute that Yeshua is going to open up his mouth and say we can make it, then what are the people going to say? Yeah, he wants to be the king. That's why he's saying it. So Yeshua kept quiet. Only, this is the Meshech Chacham explains, only Kalev, who didn't have a Negiah one way or the other way, he's not the leader, he could say, and come and say, it's not because of Moshe, it's because of the Schus. And that's what it says, Vayas. And now let's look at the pasuk. Vayas Kalev esa'om el Moshe. He told the Am el Moshe, this that you think that everything depends on Moshe, it's not Moshe. The Gadol only does it with the koach of Klal Yisrael. The Shechina is shayr in Klal Yisrael. Not the Gadol has special power. And so before going up to the conquering Eretz Yisrael, Yeshua says in Sefer Yeshua, Kel chai b'kirbeinu. The Shem